So we're really happy to have Esther and even also her colleague Jane from ILRI, and they are gender experts. And we would love to hear their insights and why it is so important to consider gender norms for achieving inclusive impact for a project like ours. And so I'm giving the floor to Esther, and after her presentation, we have the opportunity to have a discussion. If in between, I guess if you have very urgent questions, something is unclear, I think you can raise your hand, and then it's up to Esther to briefly stop and maybe ask. The floor is yours, Esther. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and Esther for being here today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mia, and thank you everyone for making time to join and to listen to our presentation. For the introduction, yes, Mia has introduced us as the gender experts. I think at most we only humbly qualify to be gender researchers because we are studying and learning and unlearning. So there's myself, Esther, and then there's Jane. Jane is also my colleague, and Jane, it would be a pleasure to have you also introduce yourself because we do this learning from the field along with Jane. So Jane, feel free to introduce yourself before we proceed.
Thanks, Esther. Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, wherever you may be. My name is Jane Namatov, and I'm based in Uganda. I support gender activities in Uganda in the pig value chain. Yeah, we are mostly focusing on the social norms, empowerment, women empowerment, and also youth. We also do some youth empowerment studies in Uganda. Over, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Jane. Yeah, so a few discussions around engagement with your technical team, the CIRNA technical team. And that conversation is what has brought us to this space where we would like to share. And also there was interest from the side, especially expressed by Mia, our colleague Wanyama Ibra, and our colleagues from Uganda, Joshua on policy, as well as Joshua from VSF German. So this is an ongoing discussion. We haven't learned all that we need to learn or unlearned all that we need to unlearn, but we are on a journey and we welcome you on this journey with us. Yeah, so the key question of consideration that we had was, why is it important to consider social dynamics and gender norms? So why should this be of importance? Why would we even give it a thought? And the overview of the presentation is that we want to understand, or at least explain to the extent that we've understood, what social norms and gender norms are, give you some examples that we found, also show a few of the consequences of where the presence of these norms within the value chains that we've studied. That's especially in Uganda, the pig value chain. But we also want to share an example of where we've interacted with another technical package, that's the breeding team in Uganda, with regard to gender integration. And then we would have a time for reflections. So a social norm or a gender norm. What's a social norm? There's lots of researchers that have gone on ahead before us who have tried to unpack what a social norm is. And one of the prominent voices has been Brikeri, but she comes from a background of economics. And what I can say is lots of fields have studied. There's anthropology, there's economics, but then there's also we've also seen a number of colleagues who are studying social norms, especially from sociology. But from this perspective of Biakari, she was looking at it as it's a rule of behavior such that individuals prefer to conform to it. That's a social norm. It's a rule of behavior. Individuals prefer to conform to it on two conditions. One condition being that most people in their reference network conform to that, or most people in their reference network believe they ought to conform. And I'll just talk about this reference network. So the reference network, simply put, are those people that are around a person whose opinions matter to the person, or who the person will consider before they make a decision with regard to their behavior. So a social norm is that rule of behavior that, someone will decide, let me do this because people think this is how I should behave, or because I believe this is how most people behave. So it's out of what you observe people doing, that's the empirics, what you see people actually doing, or what you deduce in your mind to think that that's how people think I should, that's what people think I should do. Now, of key interest has been gender norms, but why gender norms? Gender norms are only a component of social norms. So social norms will encompass many different things, as I'll show us in a few slides down there. But gender norms are one component of social norms. Usually, our key reference when we're enacting social relations will be, oh, am I interacting with a man or is it a woman? Like you enter a space and the first thing you're thinking is, oh, is this a man I'm interacting with or a woman? And no one tells you that, when you enter a room, start to look out whether you're interacting with a man or a woman. It's just kind of inbuilt because socially, that's how we have been brought up. So when you enter a space, you immediately deploy your gender thinking. Who am I interacting with and how should I behave? So if I'm a woman, the first thing I'll be thinking, oh, it's a man. How should I respect them? Or should I massage their ego? Maybe they'll present themselves better if I do this, or perceive me better if I do this. So quickly you're using one force, which is the gender force, to enact that interaction. But gender norms are that component. So they define what do we see as acceptable or appropriate behavior for men and for women within a given society. That's one definition. That, how should men and women behave? What's looked at as acceptable? What's looked at as appropriate behavior? However, beyond simply what is behavior and actions, gender norms also encompass the structure of power because historically, the way societies have been structured, they've been structured with gender in mind, but also with power relations. So the gender norms that we now come to interact across each other with, they also carry along the power structure. They also carry along the structure of privileges that those bring, the structure of rights that those bring. So beyond simply looking at what's acceptable, what's unacceptable in terms of action, also what's the power behind, what are the privileges behind. Now, we've done a number of studies in Uganda over the past few years, and some of the explorations that we've seen in the pig value chain have opened our eyes to see different things, different activities that are looked at as appropriate or inappropriate for men and for women to engage in. Specifically for women, I've highlighted a few examples of what we found in terms of what's considered inappropriate for women to engage in. In some regions, it's inappropriate for women to ride, to sit split-legged on maybe a bicycle or a motorbike and ride. It's considered inappropriate and unacceptable. In also some regions, it's inappropriate for women to be manning the butchery stalls where meat is sold, such as we see the woman here doing, the woman that's selling meat at a butchery stall. This is considered inappropriate in some parts or even in most parts of Uganda. So for a woman to stand like this and cut pork and sell pork, it's considered highly inappropriate. And some of the reasons they give, there will be reasons such as a woman should be a nurturer, not someone who is holding a knife and looks like she has a posture of harming someone. She should be motherly and a nurturer. But when she's seen holding a knife, she's frowned upon because they say it's inappropriate for a woman to appear this way. Another norm that we found was that it's inappropriate for women to to supply veterinary services such as AI services. So for a woman to engage in provision of AI services to pigs, it's considered highly inappropriate. However, the thing with gender norms is, while they define what is considered inappropriate, they also define what is considered appropriate. So for example, in the pig value chain in Uganda, it's considered appropriate for women to be the ones that clean up, that are interacting with pigs in the pig pen, cleaning up, feeding, engaging with the pigs, taking care of the piglets, cleaning up and taking out manure. That should be things that women do. One thing I would like to highlight is that when gender norms define what women should do, in the same space, they will define what men should do. But at the same time, there will be kind of a structure such that either internally or externally outside the individual, there is enforcement of these norms. I'll give an example. So if it is appropriate for women to be within the household taking care of pigs in the pig pen, the other side is that men are the ones who go to the forefront, to the market side, to market these pigs. And therefore, it's often inappropriate for women to cross into that angle and go to market pigs. But aside from defining these two roles, there's also that now the man is often the one who's the decision maker in the household, but also traditionally given the title of the breadwinner. And all those now justify why he has to go out in the market space, while the woman is playing the supportive role in the domestic sphere, taking care of the pigs. So gender norms often leave no doubt in your mind as to what you should do in an instance. It will be rare that when you're faced with a scenario, you'll be questioning, what should I do? If you're from that tradition, from that culture, it will be often very well defined for you when you're in a space to know what to do. Why? Because they are introduced from a very early age. When someone is still young, they observe what mama and papa do. They observe what their elder siblings do. They observe what the grandparents do. So you observe and you learn. But not only that, there will be folk songs, stories told to ensure that the lesson strikes home and you take it very seriously. So that's how norms are. Now, within the pig value chain in Uganda, in our studies, we found a number of things that because of these norms, there's some structures that we observe. We observe that women are dominant in small scale production. We observe that women are limited in participating, especially when it comes to pig aggregation, collecting pigs from different farmers and selling and trade. Women are also limited in terms of how much they can control income, because if it's the man marketing the pig, then it's very difficult for the woman to take full control of that income. And then we also see that because of these norms, women are limited in the extent to which they can leverage or they can take advantage of lucrative pig value chains in Uganda, especially nodes such as transportation, nodes such as selling at the pork joints, because in these areas we find that women are mainly absent. And we also see invisibility of women in the high-value pork products. We were told that women are not allowed in the slaughterhouses, and therefore, when it comes to the sale of pork, it's usually the men. Accessing the mainstream pork products, it's the men who sell those. However, a few women are observed, those who take maybe the smaller parts, such as the hooves, the heads, or even the intestines, that which they sell to people that breed dogs. So you can see that women try to create a niche, but you cannot call it a high-value niche. It's a very, very minor bargain, given their participation or their key contribution in production. We also find a hostile market environment, and that it's hostile in the sense that even the women that can be employed in areas such as to work in the pork joints or to work selling pork, oftentimes their employers are male, and they would give you a reason and say that I employ this woman, but I pay her lower than I would have to pay a man, because a man, according to gender norms, is traditionally considered the breadwinner. So I have to pay him more. But if I pay a woman in the home, I expect that she's being taken care of by another man, and therefore I can pay her less. So that's already creating a way where there's exploitation. And sometimes there's gender-based violence. So because it's not expected that women should be in the slaughterhouses, the few that are found there, if someone is pinching them up, touching them the wrong way, it's seen as something normal or something to joke about. However, it should not be like that, but it's more or less acceptable behavior in that space, because it seemed like they should not be there. What are they looking for in that space? Now, apart from gender norms, so we've seen that social norms also encompass gender norms. But apart from gender norms, there's other norms that are at play. So I'll give an example. In different contexts, we bring along who we are. That's like our identity. Could be your race, could be your ethnicity, could be your religious beliefs. You don't put that completely off. You can desire to put them off totally, but because they are part of who you always are, you'll find that in interactions or social interactions, these also play a role. Like someone would not say, I'm a youth, but when I reach a place, I totally forget that I'm a youth, and then I just interact. They will carry along the fact that they are a youth. They will carry along their religious beliefs. They may try to forget it completely, but because they've been attuned to these from an early childhood, these are things they'll carry along. Aspects about their ethnicity, which affects the traditions that they adhere to, they are likely to also bring these. And all these interface with social and gender norms when people interact. Sometimes we found that religious norms are coherent when they're speaking to some gender norms. For example, there might be religious text that says women should not slaughter. And so that religious text kind of emphasizes this norm or reinforces this norm for the category of people that adhere to these religious beliefs. Then for the youth, there will be some youth norms which now intersect with gender norms. For example, a female youth. What are those things that a female youth should not do? Those things that are not expected of her. So we see that there's the bigger view, the social norms, but within those social norms, there's gender norms. And aside from these, there's even further unpacking as you interact with communities, where you find a community that there's dominant belief systems. Those will also feed into gender norms, either to reinforce the gender norms if there's coherence, or there'll be the reason that those gender norms are toned down if they are not coherent with the gender norms. So sometimes in working with the different communities, we found that also these aspects play a key role. The different aspects of social differentiation, we have to keep them in mind as we are talking. I'll give an example of a tradition like about transportation, that the area that we studied mainly in Uganda was central Uganda, and in central Uganda, the dominant ethnicity we interacted with were the Baganda, and amongst the Baganda, women were not supposed to ride bicycles. So it's a gender norm. Yes, women in many places don't ride. However, this now interacts with the ethnicity, and therefore we see an aspect of tradition that traditionally now women do not ride, and these reinforce each other. We are now winding up. So how have we worked to support interventions through gender integration? So we've worked in a number of ways. One of the ways that we work is like we have this spectrum that we've adopted, that in our work, let the initial goal be that we do no harm. Let's start from a point where we say, let's not do any harm. As we align ourselves to the Sustainable Development Goals, the overall idea is let's do no harm. And also with gender work, that's how we intend to do. Now, the next part is how do we have reach? So we've done no harm. However, we are not just doing some work so that we don't do harm. The alternative between doing no harm and benefiting the community should be there. So how many people are we reaching? So the starting point should be how many people do we intend to reach? And then the next is how do we benefit those people that we reach? Do we benefit them in ways that they can also count those as benefits? The lens that we use for calling them those, for calling what we call benefits, is it the same lens that the community has as benefits? So we need to see that there's an alignment. However, beyond doing no harm, having some reach and benefits, we now work even further to empower and then to transform. To empower means, are we strengthening the ability of men and women to make strategic life choices by themselves? Do they have that agency? Can they make choices? And then can they follow through those choices and live the lives that they desire? And lastly, that is the part of transformation. So transformation is where we see the social structures and we say that, okay, there is benefits, people are empowered. However, these are not well spread out. Maybe some people are getting more benefits than the other. Why? Because of the social structures in place. Which are those social structures in place that we need to transform, that they maybe need to change? And the onus is not on us as the researchers or the gender researchers to change these social structures. Rather, how do we work with the communities so they acknowledge that we do understand in this area there's need for transformation and we are ready to transform this, and they work and transform and own that transformation. So this is the spectrum of how we work with stakeholders, we work with communities, we also work with technical teams. Now, the next part that I would want to show us is how the integration takes place. So as we work, the starting point will be, for example, now interacting with CIRNA, we have a technical intervention around manure management. So the technical intervention will work to do no harm, will work to reach a certain number of men and women whom we can report, and to benefit them in ways that they can also perceive the benefit. So there is a scientific benefit that we see, probably through our publications, but also on the side of the community, they see that actually there's a benefit to ourselves. We acknowledge that there's a benefit. And then now that's where we go to the next part, which is the role now us as the gender lens, where we come in with the gender lens to do the strategic gender work where we work around empowerment and around transformation. And that transformation is really about the way things have usually been done, the norms, the practices, the gender norms, the social practices, and work around those to transform them and create a more equitable community. Yeah. So how does the gender integrated differ from the gender strategic? So we've said that the gender strategic talks around empower and transform. The gender integrated works within the technical packages, such as within manure management, such as working with the teams in manure management. So what we can do is to integrate gender analysis so that manure management as a technical intervention has a better performance. And then our strategic part now will be empower and transform, which is towards gender equality, where both men, women, young men, young women, and girls and boys can equitably get the benefits. I'll give an example of supporting gender interventions in Uganda. Here we had interventions interfacing with Pig AI, and the gender integration was how do we work with the communities and where do we change the structures? Where do we bring the transformation? Where do we bring the empowerment? So the empowerment is where we see this woman who's now working as selling pork at the pork joint, but also we see a woman who is taking care of her pigs. So you meet the women with empowerment. We meet the women where they are. We don't change any structures, but we address the constraints that they have in those spaces. The example in Uganda here is for the woman who is selling at the pork joint. She was selling in the pork joint, however, she was not well dressed well or well covered. So our intervention was, how do we train her to manage hygiene in this pork joint? What hygiene items can enhance her appearance? So we saw the items of the head wrap, the head wrap, the apron, as well as having boots. And these are the items that can enhance her presentation when she's doing her work. For the women who are providing technical services, the women AI service providers, we saw that they were not respected in the community. And therefore, what we saw was the breeding team provided training to them, but then on our part, we provided the lab coats, the boots, and also trained them to enhance their confidence as they provide AI services. And their dressing was to mimic how the men AI service providers are dressed. So we provided the same dressing for the women and also for the men, so that they all appear the same and the community can appreciate that the women have been trained. And for the women pig farmers, it was also confidence building so that they can bargain for higher prices. This was so we can empower them to work within the spaces where they are present. Now, they can work within the spaces where they are present. However, if we don't work with the overall community, whatever we are doing in these spaces where we meet women is limited. The extent to which it can support them is limited. That's why we now moved to the gender transformative intervention. And within this intervention, we had community conversation to bring together community so they can reflect on these key norms, but also we had radio talk shows. And at the radio talk shows, we brought along the women who are AI service providers, successful pig farmers, so they can tell the stories of their journeys, how they engage in these activities, how long they've been engaging, the support they get from their communities. And so working with the community helps the community to accept women in these roles, but also creates a wider market. For the woman AI service provider, now more people can accept her. For the woman selling pork, now more people can accept her. This means for them a bigger market that they can target. And the lessons, this is the last slide from our end, and then I'll follow here. So the lessons we learned from the gender integration. The radio talk show increased visibility of women. The visibility of women in some fields which are considered traditionally for men, such as provision of AI services, but also increased their voice, because now as we brought them aboard and they were speaking and telling of their journey, what they've studied, how they are able to provide AI services, the challenges they face, people in the communities hear them, and once people hear them, they also know, okay, women do exist in these fields. Visibility is also important because then even policymakers are able to hear and say, oh, there's women in such and such a role. Because sometimes the way policies are framed, they are framed to take care of only one side. Say, for example, if it's a policy around meat inspection, you may find the policy stipulated as referring to a man should wear this, the man doing this should wear this. So by simply stipulating it in that way, it's not recognizing that there may be women who are also playing roles in those fields. When we had the community conversations, because the women also came along, including those in fields considered traditionally for men, there was increased recognition of these women. There was an appreciation of who they are. there was an understanding from the community that in our midst, we have women who provide AI services. We have women who are selling at pork joints. We can actually be clients to them. And this awareness increases the market reach, or at least the customer base for these women. Confidence building also improved the aspirations of the women themselves, so that now they can see themselves beyond simply playing small roles in those fields where they've already tried to get a niche for themselves, but showing that you can actually expand your business. You're providing AI services in one location, but you could move even to other locations. But also now they're able to present themselves better and people recognize them. And I think that's where I'll wind up and call Mia for some key reflections. Mia, you're welcome.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Esther. So interesting. And I'll keep it very short because we're running out of time. If you could click a few clicks further, this is a brief reflection of what we as CIRNA are doing. We're collecting data, soon we're analyzing data, then we have the farmer trainings, and we will work with the enabling environment, right? So the data collection includes the pre-survey and the manure management survey currently ongoing. Then we have the tape. There's also a scoping study document where we try to understand how do the different regions look like in terms of the environment, but also socially. Then we thought of focus group discussions to really harness a bit more of the social insights, and at least that's what we intended to have bi-weekly calls and smaller teams, including the enumerators, who will give qualitative insights, really to answer what are we observing also in terms of gender norms. What is the usual? Do we have deviations? And often these deviations, we can also call them positive deviances because they're interesting to look at. And then the manure management survey, we are collecting some samples, they are analyzed in the lab, and in the end, if you could go one back, in the end, there will be also the farmer trainings based on what we found in the lab, what we found in the field, and with the help of WOFAC and VSF and Regenerate Africa, there will be the extension part, and working with the enabling environment will be the policy gap analysis. All of that to say that in a way, yes, we're working with manure that is on farm, but we also have to consider that if there's any change in the natural resource base that we want to move differently, it should be maybe covered, it should be turned, and so on. These are all behavior changes we have to work with social norms, social systems. So we're solving a social problem if we're really thinking about having impact. And Esther, you could change to the next slide. I think that's the same what I just said, that basically there's the core. We are doing household surveys, but we are actually, whom are we asking? Often we are asking the household head or sometimes the wife. So one person, one perspective of all of them, but we're also asking who does what to really understand in whom's hands are the tasks that we're trying to influence. And then the household, the individuals are embedded in households, the households are embedded in communities. We are partly working with the village elders to move in with our surveys, but there are also schools and other institutions. So what we are trying to target is awareness, training, and to the benefit of all. If many individuals change, households change, community changes, one community changes to more sustainable manure management practices, the waterways will be cleaner for the next community. And of course, if all of that aggregates, if we manage to scale, also at national level, we have benefits, which is why the policymakers should be really interested in this topic too. And we have analysis of what policies currently do as an enabler, but also markets, or also the environmental context, or also religious systems, as Esther said. If you could click, Esther, I think there are lots of little stars to indicate where are we actually already kind of working with. But so the manure management practices happen mostly at household level with specific tasks being performed by individuals. So who currently does what and why? This is a key question. Also, what would need to change, have to change for them to adopt improved practices? How and why? Awareness, training, is it approval of the community to change what you are doing? What is my rights? Do I have land rights, or do I have the right to own an animal? Groups around, or maybe it could be an entry point for change to form groups for training, and also maybe the way that individuals can interact with markets. So who would benefit also from or get negatively affected by these improvements that we are targeting? We have to ask ourselves that if we want to achieve inclusive impact. And I would like to thank Esther and also thank everyone for being here. We will use the last few minutes for any questions from your side, any own observations that you have made in the field. And this is just an introductory call, basically, to open the floor, and hopefully we can collaborate more in the future. Joshua Zake, Joshua Weiswa already said they will share their tools, the policy gap analysis tool, and also the training materials with Esther. Also, Ibra, I think, is sharing our manure management survey tool. I am sharing my tape tool just to get feedback on what else we can do better to really make sure we consider the social part of it. So your questions, your own observations, or maybe also your ideas on what else we as a CIRNA project could do and should do so that we really have the impact that we are envisioning.
Yes, Maya, may I chip in?
Yes.
I just wanted to know whether you're also considering health risks related with manure management, and who is mostly affected with these risks. Yeah, I didn't see that being highlighted in your presentation.
Yeah, we do have health questions in the survey, and we ask, if I remember correctly, and Ibra can help on that. I think we ask to what extent the household has been affected of diseases that could be linked to manure handling.
Okay, I can chip in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you, Jen. So we have questions on who handles manure, first of all, and then we also ask, do they use any safety gears, which relates to exposure, and then we ask if maybe there have been the household that has been exposed to any diseases related to suboptimal management of manure. So at least that one is captured there. Back to you.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
And we can continue the conversation, of course. I think, Ibra, you are already also in good contact with Jane. And I see Konstantin's hand is up. Konstantin.
Thank you. Leah, do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
My question goes to Esther. Thank you for the presentation. I'm just wondering why all the examples you gave about social norms were only on women versus men. What is acceptable for men and what is not acceptable or inappropriate for women? Because I would have loved to see the other aspects of the society, like children. Where do they come in as examples when talking of the social norm? Thank you. That's my question.
Sorry, I'm struggling. I'm struggling to unmute. Thank you very much for your question. So one thing is the children are in there, and we do acknowledge the role that children play. In fact, even in literature, what we observe, as well as what we observe on the ground, is that children are usually working along with the women within the household, in some of the aspects within the household. But then they can also easily be compelled by any other adult to play certain roles, which make them interface with manure management at different points. Some could transport, and they play all these kinds of roles. However, within our research, usually like research approval and all that, what happens is we engage people that are above 18. I mean, ordinarily for legal reasons, you can't say, now I'm interviewing a minor and I'm going to publish that data. It becomes very difficult. But as we work with the communities, I think in one of the slides that you saw where we were engaging the community, there was a space that was set aside where children were seated, because even when we engage the women, you bring the women, but who do they leave their children with? They'll have to bring the children along. So you will have to keep the children somewhere, take care of them, make those provisions, because when we make those provisions, we improve the participation of women. The aspect of not having I do acknowledge that I also didn't have examples which showed maybe things that men do which are inappropriate for women, or things that are inappropriate for men to do that are appropriate for women. I mean, I didn't highlight photos of men. That we should be doing more and more going forward, at least getting photos from the ground, because also what we do acknowledge is where men do not participate and women participate, and we want to engage women in interventions, we end up overloading the women. And when we overload them, then they are further disempowered. So they crowd out men from masculine roles, but men are not taking on feminine roles. And if that happens, then we are kind of bringing a negative shock to the community. So we are still working. It's still a work in progress. That's why I said we are learning and continuing to learn and unlearn. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Esther. Konstantin, does this answer your question?
Yeah, it does. But my concern was that to capture some of these norms, I don't think it's necessarily needs to interview the minors or something, but maybe the parents or the community members who are adults can share their experiences when it comes to what is appropriate for children or inappropriate for children. Yeah, that's my thinking.
I think, Ipra, we also capture that in the survey, no? Who is doing that? And children is one choice, but we don't interview them either.
Yeah, we don't interview, but we ask who actually does the work, and children are part of the alternatives.
Perfect. Yeah. Esther, yes, sorry.
Yeah, I've forgotten what I wanted to say. Sorry.
Oh.
Maybe I can throw some question.
Perfect. Yes, Martin.
Yeah, mine is related to gender-based violence, especially at the household level. We do know that one of the triggers of gender-based violence at household levels in communities is resource control. And therefore, I wanted to ask Esther if, in the involvement of women in, for example, pig value chain, being able to control the resources, some are involved in even a butchery business, earning some income. Did you find any risk that women who now are empowered and can generate some income from the kind of work they do in the pig value chain are at any risk of being violated by their men because they are empowered? In some communities we work with, the empowerment of women, as much as it is positive, on the negative side also creates quite some risk for them in terms of exposure to violence by their own men.
Yeah, thank you so much for this important question. So one of the things that we found is, or that we can say also, is that when people consider norms and when people consider their action and whether it's going to be empowering to them, they will give consideration to their social structure, they will give consideration to the man, they will give consideration to what we call the reference group, could even be in-laws, could be their friends. So apart from the gender-based violence, sometimes there's even other violence. So women put into consideration all these as they try to engage in the market. And some of the strategies they use, for example, you find if she sells pork, then maybe some money she will give to the husband, or if she's getting economically empowered, then she's taking care of finances at home. She makes sure she's contributing something. Additionally, she employs someone to work at home. Some would take strategies such as getting locations for work which are in close proximity with the home, so that they can minimize suspicion, because sometimes the husband will say she's gone off too far to interact with other men. She's not really doing business. So she gets a location close to home where even her interactions can be seen by the family. So these are alternatives that women are using. The women are using some of these alternatives to kind of avert or at least allay the fears that men have towards their empowerment. So it's still a continuous bargain. We see that there's a continuous bargain going on. Women try to go against some norms, but women try to hold on to some other norms in order to ensure that there is peace in their households, because they do value their homes also. And we do value the social structure. It's not like we want to do away with it totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you and all that.
Maybe to add on that, I think also, Esther, is it correct that often programming involves men as well, creating awareness there first, so they are almost the ones officially empowering the women to do these extra tasks or giving them opportunities, making them understand that it's to the benefit of all, of the whole household, if everybody, can join hands. And that would be a way to avoid that further as well. But we can think further about the gender-based violence risks in our project and whatever we are planning. So we are not blind and we don't cause any harm. And I think maybe Esther can also help us when we are developing the trainings or any suggestions. Thank you so much, Martin. And I see Joshua's hand up as well, right?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, yeah, for the opportunity. Yeah, the presentation is appreciated, spot on, and also shares experiences on gender integration and transformation. But just want to build on what Mia you've shared in terms of engaging the men or even other power centers or even at a policy level, because sometimes what we see as norms are actually influenced by the power centers, which can also be the culture, the religious institutions, the policy frameworks, the government, and so on and so forth. So just wondering whether you have any experiences in engaging at that level, because also transformation, the real sustainable transformation would come when changes at that level happen. For instance, at a household setting, if their husband's attitude or now their wife should be better involved in the project or even providing a supportive role is appreciated, it can also help to manage the risk of gender-based violence at that level. At a power center level, say at a religious or cultural institution level, if engagement happens at that level, maybe there is a change and a redistribution of roles of the different gender categories. But of course, some of these things require a lot of time to see the change. But some of them also require a change of what? Of attitude. Because in a situation of a man and wife at household setting, if you're changing roles or even changing attitude, it might also mean that the powerful gender is giving up some of its power and influence. And of course, if that is not managed very well, it can actually be a barrier to the overall transformation we want to see at the end of it all. Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to raise that, but also see whether there are possibilities to engage at the level of the power centers rather than engaging at the lowest level, and then you do the things, but then the actual interventions cannot happen because the person or the entity with the influence is not in agreement with what is going on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for these observations. And we ourselves do have many questions, sometimes to ourselves, sometimes to what we are doing. And yes, it's the change, the transformation, it does need to take time, and it also has to be very systematic. So one of the things that we do is engage when we hold the community conversations. We do engage different kinds of leaders, can be the political leaders, not for the politics, but also because, as you rightfully said, you find that what we observe as a norm, there might be a power holder who is even from a political system that's holding that opinion, and what the opinion they hold matters to the community. And then we bring together also the religious leaders. We also bring together we bring together the cultural leaders. For example, in Uganda, when we had the radio talk shows, one of the talk shows was hosted at CBS, which is traditionally from the Buganda Kingdom. And so we had the opportunity of having a slot of a conversation during the shows, one of the evening shows. So that helps that as you're engaging these power holders and people can see that you're engaging with a power holder they trust, you have a message and you have already brought on board the power holder. And that approval kind of enables them know, okay, so some of these are norms that we can question. And in our workshops, we also make sure to invite some of these people so that they come, because their views are important in terms of speaking to people, causing people to reflect, causing people to know that, yes, they have power, but how do they use that power? Because what we've observed, as you said, within the household, that person that has power may not want to lay it down, but maybe he does need to lay it down in order for some meaningful change to happen. So how do you get them to lay it down? Because they are self-interested. And what rationality usually means is if you're self-interested, you choose what works best for you. And it may not intersect with what works best for the other household members. However, for the overall good, it could be that you say, okay, let me be reasonable and lay aside a bit of this. And what would be the bargain? The bargain would be maybe I get something better, or we all get something even better. But it's bringing them on board so they can see that the better scenario is where someone else also has consideration within your maximizing your best benefits. Yeah, so bringing on board different kinds of people. Thank you, and over.
Wow, we have some really intensive discussions, a lot of interest. Thank you so much, everyone. Who else would like to share something? I know we are over time. I appreciate that you still stay, but I wanted to ask Daphne, Lynette, or anyone. Also, I see Nelson and Penina are here with fresh impressions from the field. Maybe they have observed gender norms and exceptions from gender norms. So this is a quick opportunity to speak up and share your impressions. Please raise your hand if you would like to say something. I see someone is also typing. I think it's Esther and also Nelson. Well, yes, there's other enabling actors indeed. Let's really consider this as a starting conversation. Soon, a subgroup of the CIRNA project will also have conversations about scaling. So all of these considerations will also flow into that. If nobody else has a question or a comment, then I would like to thank Esther and also Jane so much for your time, for considering taking the perspective of the project, sharing what you've seen. This has been really enriching and very useful for us. Thank you so much, and let's continue the conversation. Thank you, Nelson, for sharing.
Bye.
Thank you so much, and bye for now.
Thank you.